A very good morning and welcome to AMLive. This is the edition 2017. My name is Mijungu, and this Monday I'm privileged to be sitting here to speak to you about issues that affect the nation. And as always, every Monday we'll be putting into perspective many of those topics that form the largest discourse in this country. And today, as every Monday, it is the point. And in studio with me later to speak about everything that characterized the week and over the weekend is Shem Ochuodho, Professor Peter Anyang'-Nyong'o, Governor Muthomi Njuki, Alice Wahome, and Farah Maalim. They'll be joining me to speak about all these issues that characterize you day and night and what forms the substantive part of the discourse in this country. Before then, let's take a look at some of the stories that we'll also be doing for you this morning.
Irregularities and illegalities mpaka yarekebishwe na wale ambao walihusika watolewe kando.
We are a nation that is governed by a constitution, na lazima tutafuata hiyo katiba, na waamuzi wa serikali itaundwa ni nani? Ni ya Wakenya.
NASA insists on no reforms before elections, but Uhuru says there is no crisis.
These are people who ordinarily speak to each other. So why would they need a mediator? All they need is one of them to take the first move, to pick up the phone and call the other.
Caucus of leaders who support Uhuru want him to hold talks with Raila Odinga. The mastermind of the killings at Lokichogio Secondary School was a South Sudanese soldier. And 3-day of national mourning as death toll in Mogadishu twin attack go past 230. Right, we'll be talking about those stories shortly, but first let's take you what's in your dailies. And we begin with the Daily Nation. And the headline on the Daily Nation is Wafula Chebukati, IEBC Chief Executive Officer, answers Raila Odinga on polls. And says the IEBC has given detailed response to each of the opposition's 34 conditions ahead of the repeat presidential election. It says it will give NASA full access to results transmission system, but declines to sack Ezra Chiloba and 9 other IEBC managers. That is the headline of the Daily Nation. Right also in front of the Daily Nation, 2 pictures side to side from Mombasa, where Raila Odinga was holding a rally, and one of President Kenyatta, where he was also holding a public rally. And obviously, for different reasons, President Kenyatta holding rallies ahead of the October 26th general election, which he's convicted and convinced is going to happen, and Raila Odinga holding a rally to tell his supporters not to turn out for the October 26th general election. 2 different ideologies yesterday, but both in political rallies. Also making your headline this morning is the twin bomb attack in Mogadishu, that's in Somalia, where it's reported right now that at least 250 people have died in those attacks. Very unfortunate indeed in the neighboring country that is just recovering from years and years of conflict, and now another attack that has killed 250 people in Mogadishu. This is an important story that right here at The Nation will continue to follow it up for you. On the second page of the Daily Nation, the story that has also been spoken about over the weekend, why Group wants ICC to probe Raila Odinga. That is the International Policy Group, which says that the NASA leader instigated violence in Kajiado. Now, each of the allegations has been explained in detail, links to the online publications and videos where the statements were documented and attached. The petition also cite the statements by Raila Odinga after the election was nullified, where he asked NASA supporters to hold demonstrations in major towns. So it's round 2 of the ICC. We'll also be speaking to my panel about this round 2 of the ICC. And nice picture of Nyandarua governor there, Kirinyaga rather, Governor Anne Waiguru, dressed and it's Brigadier Waiguru on the campaign trail. And also read about the city's newest meeting point and find out where is that. It's a hint, it's along Tomboya Street. Read about it in the Daily Nation. Now, Governor Njuki is already here. And one of the stories that Eunice Omolo is filing on the Daily Nation is governors, nurses to talk as court bars hiring. That's a story that is on page 3 of the Daily Nation. Probably because Governor Nyong'o will also be in attendance, we'll be asking them this about the nurses strike, page 3 of the Daily Nation. All right, page 4 of the Daily Nation, NASA leader Raila Odinga explains his trip to London, where he says that he went to London to set the record straight because the government has the consuls and high commissions and envoys in the foreign countries where they can do its own bidding. So he had to go abroad to set the record straight. He says that the message was skewed on page 4 of the Daily Nation. Read all about what Raila Odinga told the UK. And as Raila was speaking to the UK, President Uhuru Kenyatta was telling the foreign powers to keep off Kenya, saying that Kenya is a country governed by the Constitution. And he accused Raila of begging the West to force mediation. And this is about Nusumkate, one of the discussions you're having this morning, Serikali and Nusumkate. And either party says they are not out for the Nusumkate arrangement. And also on page 5, read about the Nyanza politics and how they plan to stop the poll on page 5 of the Daily Nation. This is a topic that has been discussed also over the weekend, and the Daily Nation is taking a lead and reporting extensively in the Nyanza politics and how the polls in that stronghold of NASA will go on, how they intend to stop the October 26th election. Right, and finally on page 6 of the Daily Nation, Chebukati answering Raila. This story has been given prominence on the front page of the Daily Nation. Explained on page 6, the whole page explaining the answers Chebukati has for Raila. We did a story on this, I think it was on Thursday, about the answers that the IBC is giving. However, they have refused to sack Chief Executive Officer Ezra Chiloba and other 9 managers, and they've also put in place a management team to hold this election. That is in page 6 of the Daily Nation. The back page, Deputy President William Ruto State Bank CS stands on violent demos. Who is killing people in the NASA strongholds? My panel will be talking about that also. And William Ruto, the Deputy President, is backing the state on the anti-government demos and the ban on the demos in the CBD. Remember, this was not a complete ban, it was a partial ban just to some sections of the city like Nairobi, Mombasa and Kisumu. They don't want the demonstrations to come into the city for the good reasons. But I'll be talking to my panel, the governor for Kisumu, where the demonstrations have been held and some people have died, is coming to studio. He'll be talking to us about that. But you can read about it in the back page of the Daily Nation and, of course, the sports pages of the Daily Nation. Let's take a look at the Standard now this morning. And the headline in the Standard, Raila Odinga explains why he took his case abroad, and he says his mission in the UK was not to kneel before the masters in courts as alleged by the Jubilee side, but to expose the ruling party's propaganda. The picture on the front page is the picture from Mombasa, where Raila was addressing a public rally. Right at the top of the Standard is the one for Jubilee, where President Uhuru Kenyatta was also addressing a public rally, and as I stated, both for different reasons. Good news for teachers, the state says it will hire over 3,000 teachers. That story on page 4 of the Standard. You can read about it. And before I flip the pages, there's no crisis to warrant foreign intervention, says President Uhuru Kenyatta right at the top of the Standard. You can read about it. Also a story given prominence, I think, on page 5 of the Daily Nation. Page 2, the pictorial page of the Daily Nation. Hawkers are accusing Governor Sonko of discrimination within the CBD. Remember, he's one of the most popular governors. Pictures of a man jumping there, you can read about it. And in Lokichogyo, the story we gave prominent last night also, the terror attack, the Sudanese student who turned into a killer, killing, I think, 6 students and injuring 18 others in school after some dispute. So tales of the attack, a survivor recounts night of terror at Lokichogio School. That story on page 3 of the Standard. And the killing between lovers continues. It's a story also by the Standard on page 3. Jilted 18-year-old kills girlfriend and mutilates body. Unfortunate story on page 3 of the Standard right there. You can read all about it also in the Standard. The story that gives reprieve to teachers and good news is that TSC is hiring over 3,000 teachers from ECD all the way. And the total additional numbers of tutors required next year is projected at 9,845. I read on Friday about the PSEU release that the president has actually signed 25 billion shillings in the supplementary budget that goes into the free secondary education beginning January next year, campaign pledge that might just take off in January. So the teachers are also being increased, and by end of next year, around 10,000 teachers are expected to have been hired. That story on page 4 of the Standard. And the story we are going to be discussing this morning also is about police accused of shooting innocent residents in demos. That story on page 6. Read about it and keep it here because it's going to form a substantive part of our discussion this morning. Back page, sports page, podium suit for Kenyan men. The back page of the Standard. Look for all your top stories and headlines in the Standard at the back. But first, buy a copy of the Daily Nation. Just briefly before I go, and in the Star, the headline: Uhuru rules out dialogue as Raila digs in. NASA leader says not interested in Musumkate, maintains their win was stolen in August. Police bus drag ring in Jomo Kenyatta Airport. President vote results to take longer, says IEBC. They're saying they will not be able to transmit it. And sign Form 24 and quit race. Jubilee Party leader tells Raila Odinga. Front page of the Star. Pictorial KQ stuff about that drugs bust at the airport, and yes, all other stories. Police kill 15 city human rights group claim that a total of 50 people have been killed so far. Also in the Standard, back page, Federer, it is after winning the #1. He's undisputed in the Shanghai Masters. And finally, the business briefs in the Business Daily. Relief for KQ as Equity now accepts a rescue plan. Light at the end of the tunnel as 2 banks that had objected to debt conversion sign up. Front page of the Business Daily. Prayer time for Raila Odinga right there before his public rally in Kisumu in the Business Daily. And foreign retail chains get a foothold in the Kenyan markets. I had to say, even as Nakumatt loses ground in Kenya. Story also. Front page of the Daily Nation. We'll also be taking another look at these dailies a little bit later on. And remember, most of those stories, we putting them to my panel this morning. We speak to them. But let's brief you now on some of the stories. This first story on Mogadishu. And of course, the death toll, we reported 250 yesterday. It might have risen by this morning. Now, the death toll from the twin bomb blasts that struck busy junctions in the heart of Somalia's capital jumped to over 250, making it one of the deadliest attacks since an Islamist insurgency began back in 2007. President Mohamed Abdullah Farmajo declared 3 days of national mourning and called for donations of blood and funds to victims of Saturday's attack. SPLA in South Sudan. 30-year-old Lojore had been arrested and jailed for close to a year after they intercepted SPLA vehicles at the border of Ethiopia and South Sudan to steal some merchandise. After his release, he came to Kenya and enrolled as a Form 1 student at Lokichogio Secondary School. NTV's Sharon Baranga with the report.
In 2009, Abraham Lojore was a convict and serving a jail term at a police station in South Sudan. It is here that he met Joseph Lokale, another convict. 7 years later, their destinies would unite them again at Lokichogio Secondary School, this time as students. 30-year-old Lojore came into the country this year. The two met at the dining hall, but Lojore ignored Lokale. But he followed him up and Lojore opened up to him. But he warned him against revealing his incarceration to other students. He had been arrested alongside other people after they ambushed Sudan's People Liberation Army's vehicles at the border of Ethiopia and South Sudan to try and steal. Before that, he had been a member of SPLA.
Yeye akaniita jina inaitwa Ganja kwa sababu wakati nilikuwa Sudan nilifungwa nilificha jina yangu. Sasa siku hiyo tukajaribu kuulizana naye. Hapo ndio tulijuana naye, nikamwambia rafiki, wewe wakati uliwachiliwa wakati gani? Hata yeye aliwachiliwa mapema, mimi nikabaki kwa jela. Aliniambia anafanya kazi Boma kwa boda ya Ethiopia na Sudan. Na wakati huyo kijana aliletwa kwa jela, alisemekana walipora magari ya SPLA kwa mali inaitwa Mangala katikati ya Juba na Bortown.
Looking at Lokichogio school killings timeline, at about midnight, Lojore and his gang walked up to the guard at the gate of Lokichogio Secondary School and shot him dead. They then took his mobile phone before switching off the lights in the entire school from the main switch. They then walked to the boys' dormitory, and it is reported that he shouted the name of the student who was allegedly rivaling him, but he was not there. He shot at the usual spot where he slept, killing a student who was sleeping there at the time before he started shooting indiscriminately. All this time, his friends were shooting at students who are running outside who make a big number of the injured. Lojore then walked to the dormitory where he ordered 2 students to strip naked. This is the dormitory that was used by girls. He then shot one and stabbed the other. The attack took place for about 4 hours before they left around 4 a.m. on a motorcycle.
Akanini shoot bunduki moja alafu ikanipata mimi. Ilinipata mimi. Akakuja kwa mlango. Akashoot tena ingine. Akagonga mlango. Mlango ikafunguka. Na akaingia ndani. Tukahangaika hivyo na yeye usiku.
After the sounds of the gunshot had died down, 6 students and a guard had died. 18 others were injured in an attack seen as the deadliest to ever happen at a school in Turkana County. Residents complained that police officers did not respond quickly, bearing in mind that the school was close to Lokichogio police station, the Kenya Defense Forces and GSU camps. Residents say police arrived around 5 a.m. after the attackers had left.
They are not waiting for the police to act because they are delayed.
I pray that our security agents will take care of us, will take care of our students, will take care of the public that requires their support.
Before Lojore was arrested yesterday at around 11 a.m., he had called the head teacher trying to inquire when the examinations are set to begin. He then lied that he had traveled to South Sudan. Police tracked his phone to the Kakuma refugee camp where he was found enjoying his drink. On the way to the police station, angry residents overpowered the police, took Lojore away and lynched him. Sharon Baranga, NTV.
Very unfortunate incident there. Let's move to some politics now. And NASA leader Raila Odinga has dismissed claims that he went abroad to appeal to the international community to intervene in the country's political situation, insisting he went to give the true picture of the situation. Speaking in Mombasa, Odinga accused the Jubilee administration of using its foreign embassies to spread propaganda about the opposition. And as Peter Mwangangi now reports, he also criticized the inclusion of other candidates in the presidential race.
After a 2-day visit to the United Kingdom, Raila Odinga landed in Mombasa for his first major rally since withdrawing from the presidential race. But first, they attended prayers at the Neno Evangelism Center. They then proceeded to address supporters at the Mamangina Drive.
Sasa mimi nilienda kusema ukweli. Kwa sababu walikuwa na payuka. Ati ameenda kule ukweli utajulikana. Ati amekwenda kwa foreign masters. Nani yako na foreign masters? Raila Odinga anaweza kuwa mkaragosi ya Uhuru Kenyatta. Adio Raila ameenda kule payuka kuambia wale watu ati anataka nusu mkate. Nataka nusu mkate kweli? Sisi ni wenye buffalo.
NASA says they are not keen on a government of national unity whose major proponent they claimed was William Ruto during the 2007-2008 crisis.
Aliyeleta mambo ya nusu mkate si mwingine ni William Samoei Ruto peke yake.
NASA is unhappy with the inclusion of other candidates such as Ekuru Okot in the presidential race.
Ati wamewekwa ati candidates. Hawakupata hata 1%. Alafu sasa baadaye walikuwa wameinua mkono, si walikuwa wamesalimu amri. Sasa majina yao yanarudishwa. Wewe unasema unataka kusimama kama rais wa Kenya. Na unapewa siku 10 ufanye campaign gani?
What they are trying to do is to sanitize a flawed process.
IBC haiko tayari kusimamia uchaguzi tarehe 26. Na mimi nataka niambie ndugu zetu wa Kenya na wale wanasema uchaguzi uendelee, ule wa bandia. Hawa wanataka Raila awe pale kusafisha maovu yao.
NASA says that currently the playing field is not even. They want IBC to terminate contracts for the Al Greer printing farm and OT-Mortho in as far as the election is concerned. They also want returning officers to be posted via an open balloting process and the electronic results transmission to rely on scanned images and not text messages or Excel documents.
What to your Jubilee? They have now hijacked the IBC. IBC wameweka kando mtu anaitwa Chebukati. Wameshika kuna mama moja, waria wawili na kijana mwingine. Wanapewa instructions kutoka State House.
Uhuru na Chebukati wakisema wanaendelea mbele na uchaguzi. Waende mbele na uchaguzi wao na sisi tutafanya uchaguzi wetu.
The leaders dismissed the defection of several opposition figures to the Jubilee Party, including the former senator of Mombasa, Hassan Omar.
Ati wanasema tunangoja hapa, kutakuwa na by-election Mombasa, watashikana, waje. Mimi naambia hata wasichelewe, waje hata leo, tuko tayari na hao. Mombasa ni ile, watu ni wale, msimamo ni ule.
The leaders asked their followers to defy the government's ban on anti-IBC demonstrations, asking them to turn up every day of the week starting Monday. Peter Mongangi, NTV, Mombasa.
Now, President Kenyatta was also speaking, and he's insisting that there is no crisis in the country and has dismissed calls for international mediation. The president, who led Jubilee campaigns in Nyahururu and Karatina strongholds, blames the opposition for the problems in the country, saying the NASA and its leader, Raila Odinga, are not prepared for the elections. Andrew Cheng reports.
The Jubilee campaigns today went to Nyahururu and Karatina. In Nyahururu, the president dismissed the idea of international mediators being called in to broker talks between him and the opposition in order to bring sanity in the electoral and political fronts.
Sisi hatutaki mzungu akanyanga taifa letu la Kenya na fikira ya kututawala. Sisi tumesema ukija kutembea Kenya kama mgeni, wewe uje uwe mtalii, utembee, uangalie wanyamapori, uangalie beaches, ukuje hapa Laikipia utembee, lakini uwatie siasa wananchi wa Jamhuri ya Kenya.
Kenyatta says there is nothing to solve and blames the opposition for scuttling the electoral process.
Awachane na maandamano, awachane na masharti, awachane na chepukati, awachane na chiloba, awachane na wale wana print ballot papers, ajipange kwa uchaguzi kwa sababu Wakenya wako tayari kuamua tena.
The problems that we have are a result of one man who goes by the name of Raila Odinga, who has refused to be a Democrat, who has refused the will of the people and is desirous to take power through the back door by causing violence, commotion and chaos in Kenya. But Kenyans have said, we are a nation that is governed by the rule of law and we are a nation that is governed by a constitution, na lazima tutafuata hiyo katiba, na waamuzi wa serikali itaundwa ni nani? Ni ya Wakenya na hakuna mwingine ataingilia hiyo.
Wakenya hawana shida. Simamisha maandamano, simamisha fujo, simamisha violence, simamisha vita. Wakenya wapige kura, wataamua uongozi wao.
Jubilee has warned NASA against its demonstrations, which on several occasions have turned chaotic and on Friday led to deaths. The ruling party says the government will be there to protect lives and property and that those who cause chaos will be dealt with.
Hakuna maandamano ya amani ambayo inakusababisha kupiga polisi na mawe. Hakuna maandamano ya amani ambayo inakusababisha kupiga magari za wengine na mawe. Hakuna maandamano ya amani ambayo inakusababisha kuchukua na kupora mali ya mama mboga ambaye anatafuta riziki ya mtoto wake. Hakuna maandamano ambayo inaenda kupiga police station na mawe. Hiyo sio maandamano ya amani. Tunamwambia ukitaka maandamano ya amani, fanya maandamano ya amani. Lakini ukilete furugu na kusumbua Wakenya wenzako, lazima utachukuliwa hatua.
But even with the criticism, NASA says that from tomorrow its protests will be held every day. Andrew Ochieng, NTV.
Right, tomorrow is actually from today, the week-long demonstrations. Political leaders supporting the re-election of President Uhuru Kenyatta want him to directly engage opposition presidential candidate Raila Odinga to solve the current political impasse. The leaders, mostly from Mount Kenya region, however, insist the talks should not touch on the possibility of a coalition government, according to them. The country is headed in the wrong direction and a political solution is necessary. Kenneth Muredi reports.
With the current political uncertainty clouding the country and now threatening the very fabric that holds it together, calls for a truce are emerging. Politicians from Jubilee strongholds who have been in the game for a while but were felled at the ballot are calling for a change in tact as an impasse on whether there will be elections or not persists. Led by former Kiambu Governor William Kabogo and former Cabinet Minister Martha Karua, they said it was time the main political players took bold actions for the betterment of the country.
Honorable Raila Odinga and His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta, whose fathers were the founding president and vice president of the Republic of Kenya, told the country that they usually talk when there's a problem, that they normally talk. Maybe they are talking, but all we are saying, let there be an engagement.
As we support the president, we support dialogue and talks to get Kenya away from where it was in 2007, 2008.
These are people who ordinarily speak to each other. So why would they need a mediator? All they need is one of them to take the first move, to pick up the phone and call the other, as they usually do.
They want their foot soldiers as well as other stakeholders involved in separate talks aimed at getting a quick solution.
So we are not leaving it just to them. This is bigger than any one individual. We are saying convene a national dialogue, you see? Because when people have difficulties, sometimes you need other people around them for there to be meaningful dialogue.
But even as the leaders call for a direct engagement between the main protagonists in the repeat elections, they insist that at no particular time should the talks point to a possibility of a coalition government.
The laws are very clear that the president stays as president until the next president is sworn in.
And they do an election.
Yes.
It's also putting the cart before the horse.
Yes.
Because when you call for dialogue, you don't call with a conclusion of matters that are to be discussed.
The leaders also pointed an accusing finger at the IEBC with regards to its preparedness, but want an honest re-engagement with IEBC on the presidential election process.
There are too many sideshows we have been seeing in papers about the chair, about the CEO, about some commissioners, this and the other. Let's just be open to one another and discuss this matter.
Kennedy Muredi, NTV.
I have distributed. You are the director of communications. I have distributed.
All right, time now to put some of those stories to discussion right here. Take this opportunity to introduce my guests, beginning with Dr. Shem Ochuodho, who is the chairman of the Kenya Diaspora Alliance, global leader, you may say so. Next is Governor Muthomi Njuki, Governor Tharaka Nithi. The last time I saw him, he was still member of parliament. Thank you, Governor, for coming.
Thank you. Nice
Alice Wahome is the member of parliament for Kandara. Thank you for coming, Wakili. And Farah Maalim, the Deputy Speaker in the 10th Parliament. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming. Let's begin the discussion just briefly on the devastating reports we've had in the last few days. First, on Friday night, the attack in Lokichogio. And then secondly, on Saturday morning, the Mogadishu attacks. Just like to get your comments, because we have friends and relatives who live in Mogadishu. I'll begin with the lady. The only lady in the parliament.
Thank you very much, Ken. I think we just want to sympathize and empathize with the families, condole them, the families of those who have died here in Kenya recently because of the two attacks, but also those who have died through the violence that is rocking the country, and also in Mogadishu, because I believe in any death anywhere in the world really is a humanity that is suffering. And therefore, I think we need to evaluate those situations where the international community and Kenya as a country can help. We need to think of how to stop the violence. Death is never the food for the human being. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Farah, Mogadishu and Lokichogio.
Yeah, Lokichogio is unexpected. We never expected we would have these kind of things happening in institutions of learning institutions, but Mogadishu is very, very tricky, and it's time the international community dealt with this thing once and for all. There are more than 25,000, I think, foreign soldiers inside Somalia, and you have a ragtag, ill-armed 3,000, maybe 4,000 Al-Shabaab. And there's a government, what do you call, security machinery also. Why are they not able to solve the problem? What is AMISOM doing inside Somalia? Now let me tell you what AMISOM is doing inside Somalia. AMISOM is the best partner of Al-Shabaab inside Somalia. Information has it that even the arms that are being used, even the bullets, they access it from AMISOM, they also access it from Somali National Defense Forces itself. But you see, the Somali National Defense Forces does not have that kind of military hardware. These people have no access to the sea. The countries that are in the neighborhood are active, what do you call, participants inside in AMISOM. That is Djibouti, Ethiopia, and Kenya. So where do they get these arms from?
What is the benefit? What do they get?
Well, the benefit is that it's a project. I mean, it's a very important project. You didn't hear sometimes back a Burundi soldier saying, look, I have a project back at home. I need this money. Okay. And if Al-Shabaab is destroyed once and for all, I'll be forced to go back home. Okay. So there is this business in this, okay, and which is being done by everybody. Everybody. It's being done by every contingent that's there. So the point is that Somalia is a tricky thing. And then the security machine, the people who are the experts in these things, and they call them foreign fighters. Those Arabs and Zungus and the rest of them, particularly the Arabs from the Gulf states, these are people who are from very reliable information from the security machinery of those countries.
Okay.
They are there to make sure that Somalia stays in this state because of the fear that the oil in Somalia will be exploited. And once the oil in Somalia is exploited, it becomes easier for anybody to buy oil from that than go all the way into the, the Persian Gulf and the Arabian Gulf and to go to Emirates or Kuwait or Saudi Arabia and the rest of it.
Okay.
Because that kind of bringing in a truck, a semi-trailer, with probably what, 25,000, 25,000 kilograms of TNT and everything else. And that knowledge is not something that the young boys can easily get here. This is something which is coming from countries that have security machineries.
All right.
And this is basically what it is, and people have talked about it. Okay. Saudis are responsible, the Emirates are responsible. All those countries in the Gulf states have a role in these things.
All right. Governor, yes, Lokichogio and Mogadishu, just briefly.
Thank you. First, let me take this opportunity to condole with the family of the 6 students who lost their lives in a very unfortunate situation, and retaliate that even though I may be also condoling with the family of the Sudanese, I may be feeling nothing because that was appalling. That was not called for. That brings the begging question, what is the criteria of admitting students to our high schools? How would a 30-year soldier who served in an army, in illegal army in southern Sudan, gain his entry to our secondary school in Turkana? I mean, what documents were used? Leave alone about having to really authenticate the age of this person and, of course, his background. Did he go to any primary school? Because this was a time bomb. It was due to happen. Are there others like him, maybe in such schools? That should be the begging question, because really, when you put a radical soldier in a border town like that, or county, with the students, young, 18 years, 17 years, 16, really, that is something that was due to happen, and we are really sorry about it. On the issue of Somalia, very briefly, I'm very surprised that my friend Farah, he seems very informed about the Somalia, even though I expect him to talk for Kenya.
Well, I'm a Kenyan. I talk for Kenya. That's why I'm here now.
The Amazon, as long as we are having peace along our borders, even though it's not really the total peace that we'd like to enjoy, but I've seen reduction in attacks that we had before we had our Amazon in Somalia. And we just lost our PS the other day due to Al-Shabaab attacks. So I'm not saying that we are happy when there's attacks in Somalia. We want peace in the neighborhood so that we can actually be able to have a peaceful East Africa. However, the issue of having to take away the AMISOM or the KDF, that's a story for another day. We need peace in Somalia, and if that was to bring peace, they had better stick there and ensure that we don't get attacks.
What is the military doing there? What are they doing to get that peace? Why can they go after these people and finish the job and come back?
I believe it must be a process, and therefore which has not been achieved. And when it's achieved, one day they will come back.
The process is like the Kenyan election, eh?
We'll talk about the election. Daktari.
Okay. Allow me to join my colleagues in also sending condolences to the bereaved families. Maybe the good Lord comfort them and help them to have courage to cope with what's happened. Any life lost anywhere, whether in Somalia, Kenya, Lokichogio, Kisumu, or wherever, is unfortunate. It's not necessary at all. For those of us who subscribe to the Christian faith, the Bible says, "Thou shalt not kill." I'm afraid the situation is likely to worsen as we get closer to the election day. Our security apparatus will be stretched to the limit. Obviously, then we become an even softer spot for Al-Shabaab and the other ill-minded forces. But I think at the end of the day, there are grievances that all these parties have that need to be addressed. Whether it's demonstrators, whether it is soldiers, like the case that happened in Lokichokyo, or whoever it is, there are grievances that we cannot keep sweeping under the carpet that need to be addressed. What emerges from Lokichokyo implies that there seemed to be lack of faith to the soldier who was also killed, because two wrongs don't make a right.
Okay.
Why is it that the public decided the police were not going to deliver justice and that they had to take justice into their own hands? So these are issues that we need to address as a country and as a region so that we find amicable solutions. But further, we gather this morning that the lawyer of this former CEO who was passed on of the youth fund, in rather dubious circumstances, whoever is killing, you know, you can kill the body, but you can't kill the spirit. My premise is I'm always opposed to extrajudicial executions and killings. They never solve a problem. Temporarily, they could give some comfort, but it's not fine. Let's find a way, a sustainable way to address the grievances that there may be.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. That was out of our discussion, but very necessary. Let's bring it back here to studio. And politics of the week. I'd like your comments, and this is an open discussion now, and the fact that NASA is maintaining that it's family in the race. We saw what happened over the weekend, pulling from each side, NASA and Jubilee, but NASA maintains their family out of the race, rather. Let me start with Alice.
You know, Ken, the next time I think we should be having two women here, because this table is lonely. But I want to say that the week, like the whole year, has not been bringing good tidings to Kenyans, especially when there are threats that the whole week there will be demonstrations in this town. In all over, actually. We don't have the timetable. I'm sure Farah will expound on that. But the demonstrations have not been peaceful, and they have not been conducted in accordance with the law. And I think listening to the statements that have come, statements of threats to pull out from elections, cannot be the thing that Kenyans were expecting. When we went to elections on 8th...
It's not a threat. This is a reality now.
It's a decision.
I think the reality also is coming with threats.
Okay.
It's a threat to internal security. It's a threat to peace in this country. And therefore, anybody entertaining this kind of behavior and conduct as a way to resolve any election dispute is actually outside the Constitution. The NASA team is quoting a coup that has not yet been completed. And with that, I think that unless Kenyans don't want a country after 26th of October, because there are those of us, those other Kenyans that insist that the way to resolve this, the dispute between the opposition and Jubilee, is actually through the ballot, where Kenyans can speak. We have been hearing a lot of speaking from politicians like myself, like the table here, but it is time for Kenyans to be allowed to speak. The only way they can do it is through the ballot. There were expectations that there will be a president-elect after 8th of August. That didn't happen because there was a dispute that was taken to court, and following that route, there was peace. Thereafter, there was an order that go to elections within 60 days. We have spent time, energy, and money as Jubilee to comply with the court order. Why would NASA not comply with the court order when they say there will be no... I have listened to Joho this morning and yesterday, and the team that he hosted in Mombasa, and they say they are waiting for them, you know, waiting for them. There is a lot of incitement, and for me, it is not time to call for dialogue.
Okay.
You can't call dialogue at this particular time, because it means that the country will always be held hostage by any candidate that will actually lose a presidential election. And that's what is happening.
If you hear the tone they're speaking, and Farah is here, you can speak to for them. I don't speak for them.
Yeah, yeah.
The tone is not, there will not be an election. The tone is, we will not participate in an election that is not done according to the law.
No. I don't know where you have gotten that. For me, the whole week, and even last week, and when we were here on the other sidebar. The statement is that there will be no elections.
Farah,
when you say there will be no elections, and the IEBC, that body that is mandated to conduct elections in accordance with the law and the constitution, and you are now saying there will be no elections, one, you are saying whatever, and there is a rider that whatever will happen on that day are not elections.
They are not elections. Exactly.
Yes,
that's I think
that's what they are saying.
Farah can explain to us.
Yeah.
No, what NASA is talking about is the legitimacy. You have, if you do carry out an election, it has to have a certain legitimacy. If it's not going to be to encompass or have the participation of substantial section of the country, then it's not an election.
Okay.
So what they're saying is, you see, I don't see any problems here, to be very honest to you. One, I don't see why the incumbents should be scared and worried that they have to do it this time or otherwise it will be. I don't see why they should be getting so agitated and so fidgety and running around in all this. They have the power of the incumbency. You can see there are many areas where people are joining them. Nkedienye just joined them the other day. Munya joined them. Isaac Ruto was there. I could see Hassan Omar joined them, and everybody else is. They're clearly, it's not a secret that they're making inroads in certain areas. Now, for them to get so scared to the extent which they say the elections will be held with or without NASA, and NASA to say that, look, there was systemic and systematic flaws in the manner in which the election was conducted last time. And the election was supervised and managed by IEBC. And IEBC, because of that indictment, cannot, without changes, be again expected to do something different from what they did. It's a very simple, pure logic. Simple and pure logic. If I were Uhuru and Ruto, I'd say, fine, let's sit together, let's see how we're going to conduct these elections and work out something. Whether it's going to take another 3 months or it's going to take a little bit longer than that is immaterial. For me, of course, people will come up with an idea that says that there has to be a caretaker government and maybe somebody else is going to be the president. That is another debate altogether, another legal, constitutional matters to be deliberated. But to say that this referee, I am not comfortable with this referee, I am not comfortable with this person who is printing the ballot papers and the rest of it, and for you to say, no, it's only this person who is going to print.
Okay.
It's simply straight away, it emerges without saying that you have an interest.
Okay.
Why else would you protect? A referee is a referee.
All right.
All you need to do is to have an impartial person, and then you can be sure of your own support base, and you can win in the process.
Okay. Governor, this is now about legitimacy, because it's apparent, if you look at the position that has been taken by Jubilee, it's apparent there will be an election on 26th, with or without NASA. They're talking about legitimacy now. What are you talking about yourself?
First, let me concur with my fellow Kenyans who have spoken before, here, out there, that we are only 9 days to elections, and there will be an election in this country because we are following the law. I am very surprised at the issue of legitimacy by the aggrieved parties, because there are ways of addressing when you feel you've been inconvenienced, we feel that you are aggrieved, then there are ways of addressing this. And the best way is the way they did when they felt that the elections are not free and fair. They went to the Supreme Court, and there was a ruling. And since there was a ruling that there will be an election, I am very surprised at then the same party deciding that now we do not want to participate in the elections. And instead of maybe having a legitimate way of ensuring that there's no election, they decide themselves there will be no election. And I wonder, what article of the Constitution are they using? What authority bestowed on them by the Constitution or by the people are they using to say that there will be no elections? Because there's only one body that can be able to say the date of the election, the nature of the election, that will be the election. That's IEBC and no other party. And on the issue of whether or not they're pulled out of the elections, I want to agree with my colleague, my sister, Honorable Alice Wahome. there is no real pull-out of the elections as per se. Because if you go to the bank today, Ken, and you want to withdraw money, and then you're told by the bank that you need to fill this form for you to withdraw money. You cannot tell the bank that I have written a letter to withdraw money, so give me money. If you're supposed to fill in a form, you fill in a form, because the form 24A is the statutory form that is allowed by the law in the Act of Election that allows you to pull out of the elections. What would be so difficult about filling a form? Yet Raila find it very easy to write a letter instead and say, I have pulled out of the elections. Okay. Why can't he make it a reality, really, and fill the form and say, yes, I pulled out of the elections? Then now we'll know the ABC will be putting his name there against the law. But for now, as it is, the name is going to be in the ballot. Okay. And he'll get minimum votes. And be defeated in this election. And on the last one, because Farah keeps on saying that we can have all elections without NASA, with or without NASA. The law is very clear. Article 138(2) says if we have more than one candidate nominated for the election, then there'll be an election in every constituency in this country.
Hold that thought. I'd like to come back and speak to Shem, who is the only one who's yet to comment about this, NASA family in the race. What you're talking about is contestable. The Form 24A. I'd also like to talk about that. And obviously, we still have a lot to talk about. When we come back, I'll begin with Shem. Right now, we take a short break on AMLive. We'll be back after a minute. Let's take a commercial break.
Almost 50% on this side, almost 50% on the other side. Assumption. I do know that the Constitution talks of 50% plus one, meaning the very bare minimum. As long as there's a majority, whether just by one vote, we should be okay. But I think good leadership requires that we go beyond that. That for Kenya, for us to have a transformed Kenya, for us to make the next big leap, I think we need to go beyond the 50 plus one. Ideally, Jubilee should have looked towards having the 70%. Of course, the law talks of 50 plus one. That's its threshold. But that's the very minimum. Nothing stops Jubilee having 100% or 90% of the country on its side. And if Jubilee had done certain things right in the past 4.5 years, there's no reason why that should not have been the case. So I want to take it from the premise that although legally 50% plus one is okay, but I think as a country, when you leave half of the country out, then there's a great problem. So my premise is, how do we address that fact? I think my good advice to the two principals, so to speak, they should fire their immediate advisors. I think President Uhuru is being misadvised. The Right Honorable Prime Minister, former Prime Minister, is also being misadvised. For people who have vested interests, one way or the other, I think they need to reflect. The two of them need to get this country back together. And I support the team of, I know some have been calling them losers. In a situation where we have disputed elections, it's very difficult. I would be the slowest to start branding people winners and losers. We appreciate, particularly when the same people who say, you know, there's Vifaranga candidates or winners, but at the same time branding other people names. You know, it can only be one way, it can't be both ways. Let's accept that we had an election which had problems right from the start. In fact, even before the bungled party nominations, we had 15% of Kenyans who were denied IDs, were left out. There was the other 15% diaspora who were not allowed to register. They are Kenyans. There are about 3 million Kenyans outside. So we're talking about 6 million Kenyans who didn't have an opportunity to participate in this election. So clearly there have been issues. But that notwithstanding, the advisors of these people, not because they are interested in Kenya, neither because they are concerned about the interest of their principles. I think they are concerned about their own. So my advice, let President Uhuru take a break from the people who are pushing him in a certain direction. Let the former Right Honorable do the same so that we find a way to get the country together. But I must add a rider that whatever happens, we must do it within the law, within the Constitution, and we have to have elections done on the 26th.
So you're also a proponent of no Newsom cut, right?
If that was what they decide they need, as long as it's anchored in the Constitution. I think that's what...
There's no provision for Nusum Kata in the Constitution.
Well, negotiated can be... It doesn't have to be a constitutional. Okay. I think my major concern would be more that we cannot go beyond 26 with the elections. But I also have issues when we start trying to change the Constitution.
Why can't we go beyond 26th with the elections?
Because the Constitution is very clear. It says within 60 days.
No, but we have entered an election period. I mean, we are shielded from the Constitution right now.
I don't think so.
We are shielded. I can explain that. We are shielded from...
Let me explain.
Yes.
Let me explain. First of all, Mijungu, there is a rerun or runoff, or there is a nullification of an election and another election being ordered. I have a petition right now myself for Garissa Township. If that petition goes through, the electoral, well, the writ is going to be issued, the member of parliament who is there is going to lose his seat. I'm saying if it goes through. And then, of course, what we do is that we then have certain period window in which we can now, any candidate can come in and contest in that election. Any candidate, even you, as long as you're a registered voter and you're a Kenyan, you don't have to have even your voting card in Garissa. You can have it in Busia or Bungoma or Kakamega and still go and contest in that place. There was a bit of a problem. IBC said, Supreme Court said IBC should conduct these elections in 60 days. I have never understood what the wisdom of the 60 days was. The 60 days was a presumption or an anticipation of a runoff when two candidates, nobody garners the 50+1%, and then the two top leaders run. You have a runoff in that. Ordinarily, if there was a nullification of that and it's going to be a fresh election, everybody should have a right to go and run through that. And then I thought something like more than that, a period more than that, would be only reasonable in this case. We have a lacuna in the law. It's not that well expressly and explicitly covered. What I can also tell you is that you can go into any arrangement now. When we got the National Accord, and I've repeated this many times here, when we had the National Accord was just a statute. The nation decides where the nation wants to go. You can use a piece of legislation. You don't have to stick to the Constitution. You can go back to Parliament and have an accord and decide that we will need 6 months to clean up this place, and that 6 months, you can decide what you want to do. Whether you want to have a caretaker government, whether you want to have a coalition government.
Which is not in the Constitution.
Absolutely, it's not in the Constitution. It was not in the Constitution in 2008 when we got it.
Yes.
There was no provision in the Constitution, but the nation was collapsing. It
So
was
they had to
becoming
negotiate for
a
the
failed
same?
state. Of course, you
Okay.
can negotiate. Anything can be negotiated right now to save this state.
I've heard your argument,
Yes.
and I'd like to raise a question on your argument,
Yes.
but let me see what Muthomi has.
Ken, when we sit here, we are addressing Kenyans, and we should always seem to be factual, because I have never seen a situation whereby we can pretend that there's any document in this country which is superior to the Constitution. When you talk about negotiations, it should be agreed negotiation, but that should not be superior to the Constitution. Ken, I want to draw you to Article 140 of the Constitution that explicitly explains what happens after a petition. Article 143, but 3 says, if the Supreme Court determines the election of the president-elect to be invalid, a fresh election shall be held within 60 days after the determination. There can be no, Farah says there's a lacuna in the law. Where is the lacuna? The law is very clear. 60 days after.
He has used 138.9. Yes, he's using 138.9 to explain.
Because
absolutely,
this Article 140 is what explains what happens after
the
nullification of the elections, which has actually happened at this particular case. So we were not left guessing what would happen, because it does explain what will happen if the president dies. It explains what happens if the elections the results were invalidated, and therefore, if 26th of October is still within the 60 days.
Yes.
We must stick to that.
Okay.
In whether or not there should be somebody who wants to pull out of the elections, that should not stop the elections from taking place.
The reason why I'm asking Shem, the reason why I'm asking you that question, and I asked this question to the AG, what happens if the election is not held after 60 days? And the explanation was this: once we get into the election calendar on the 8th of August, we are shielded against anything that might not happen within that period. And the logic is this: if at all, after 60 days, which is 1st of November, the election happens and no one garners 50% plus one, what happens, Muthomi?
That means we have to have an interpretation by
the
court.
No, we don't need to. We know there's a runoff. We don't need an interpretation. Absolutely. We don't need to go to court for this. So in 60 days, if an election happens and all candidates are there and there is no 50% plus one,
there will be a runoff.
Is here.
There will be a runoff.
There will be a runoff between the two candidates. So we are shielded. It means it can be extended.
You see,
the period is not absolute.
Hold on, Ken.
What do you mean it can be extended?
You have still not gotten out of the Constitution. That is because possibly the criteria for you to be elected has not been achieved. And it is provided for. But a situation where one person decides there will be no elections, and he's not saying that within the law, because Raila is not pulling out within the law.
My point is this. This period is not absolute. It can be extended if it doesn't happen.
Which clause are you using for the extension?
Hold on. In so long as the circumstances that has made the elections not happen are governed within the Constitution.
Okay, Shem.
Yes.
Ken, I wanted to say, when Mheshimiwa Farah talks of 138.9, that refers to a case where a presidential candidate or deputy dies.
Yes, after election, after he has been elected.
In this particular case, or even before.
Yes.
Like now, we know we have 8, I think there are now 7 candidates. If one of them, any of them dies, then of course there is provision for putting on hold these elections and extending.
Comes into play.
And God forbid, we are hoping that the state has reinstated the necessary security for these 7 so that none of them and their running mates passes on. But having said that, I agree that there's a lacuna in law, but not where Mheshimiwa Farah is saying. As Excellency Njuki has explained, the aspect of a repeat election where there is an invalidation of a presidential election is 140. It's very clear. It's been black and white. The Constitution is a self-healing document. It tends to have a mechanism where there's a problem, how to fix it. But that's not to say inquiry that it's going to make. It's vital that, because at the end of the day, it's the Supreme Court that tells us where there's a lacuna that they help to clarify. And the sooner this is done, the better. But it's got to be done within the 9 days.
All right. Farah, I think you have the last word on this.
Yes. No, look, what I want to say, okay, I understand. If it's a nullification, it's 60 days according to the Constitution. If it is nobody has garnered 50% plus one, then it's 30 days. The fact of the matter is that when an election is nullified, it is nullified on certain premises. And the premises and the reasons why an election is not nullified, in this case, it says systemic and systematic flaws in the manner in which the election was conducted by IEBC. Listen to me. You want an election to be repeated after 60 days. Those problems are not addressed. They are not reformed. Why would you expect somebody to come and volunteer again to sanitize something and just walk through the slaughterhouse one more time? What needs to be done right now is a national dialogue and a national discussions on this. That supersedes everything else. It supersedes the Constitution. It supersedes any other piece of legislation when the nation itself is at a crossroad. And we're almost going to become a failed state if we continue the way we're going. We need to come back together, and we had done that in 2008.
So
we're not reinventing the wheel again. We need to come back together again. Everybody to come down. Otherwise, I'll tell you what's going to happen. Hang on a minute. You know, Muthomi and the rest of them are so happy. He's the governor now. He's enjoying the perks of that. He wants to see his candidate as the president. It's a fine. You can do that. By the way, I know you have your own whatever ethnic things here and there. I don't come from this side of, I don't come from the other side. I come from that side of the country. For me, the most important, you are the ones who are fighting for the presidency and all want to destroy this country because of that. I come from that side. For me, the nation is more important than any individual. For me, it's more important than Raila, it's more important than Uhuru and Ruto and anybody else. We need to salvage. Let me tell you one thing. Go and talk to the businessmen right now. If this process continues for 2-3 more weeks, we'll still come back to the table and negotiate and do what we're talking about right now.
So ultimately,
we will come, yes.
People have to talk.
Otherwise.
And
Economy, hang on a minute.
You see, what is happening is blackmailing the country.
Alice, relax. The person who is basically demanding this thing is a shareholder in this country. This country is not exclusively owned, majority owned by anybody. It belongs to us all. And we need to talk ourselves and say, how do we move forward on this?
And to you, this is about dialogue coming to the table.
Dialogue coming. This business of, you know, talking the way people are talking left, right, and center.
The Constitution.
It's not taking us anywhere. The Constitution is man-made. It will be man-amended and man-reformed and man-did everything.
Ken, let me talk to Alice.
Hang on, let me just finish. You see, right now, the laws have been taken to the parliament. And you see, that even if you have what you call a tyranny of numbers in parliament, for God's sake, some of the things we're doing right now is not good for this country. It's not even good for the incumbents. They are better off giving a statesmanly, what do you call, direction to this country. That way they'll be appreciated. Incumbency has got a lot of benefits.
All right.
Now, those of you who are advising Uhuru and Ruto and telling them, hang on, it's an individual. It's not an individual. It's half
you know, the process of, they say the election is a process. The process is coming to an end. And they have participated until the time they lost. They had a resort to court. And a court made an order. So what we are saying, at what stage then would you now start calling for dialogue? You know, Ken, we, as a country, we must be careful not to set dangerous precedents that actually will always bring this country to a standstill during elections, because people must be ready to lose when they agree to go to elections, must also be, and must be ready to accept the verdict by Kenyans. Here, when you tell the country right now, the candidates, to go to dialogue, basically what you are saying, you actually are ignoring the other candidates. You are now discussing dialogue between Raila and President Uhuru Kenyatta, which is also fairly unconstitutional because there are other candidates in this race.
But they're the ones who are responsible for the stalemate.
Maybe they wouldn't want to go to, they wouldn't mind dialogue. The stalemate is because one candidate is not willing to lose through the normal route where you lose.
But I think this candidate you're referring to, Alice, has said that if he loses fairly, in a process that he deems fairly, he will.
Who determines the fairness?
The court determined it in the Supreme Court ruling. It was not fair.
He won. That's okay. That's okay. Yes. He won in the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court itself, pursuant to the Constitution, had no even choice, directed, because under Article 140, sub-article 3, there is specific period within, the court was just reciting what the Constitution says. And that's why we are saying this maneno that has been brought is not where within the Constitution. You could have dialogued maybe a year ago, 2 years ago, but not within this period. What if the dialogue doesn't work?
Okay, but the Supreme Court, Shem, I'm speaking to you in a second, but the Supreme Court nullified the election for a reason.
Absolutely.
Let's just proceed on that.
Have we addressed the reason?
For a reason. Has the reasons that were used to nullify the election been addressed, Alice?
You remember, if we want to respect the Supreme Court, it has also said, knowing what it found, the elections must be carried out within 60 days.
Which is okay.
And IEBC is the body, under the same Constitution, that has been told, go and carry out elections. But one of the candidates now comes and says they must do 1, 2, 3. Some of the things that they know they will not be able to happen. However, IBC itself has said, look, we have been told to conduct elections. They have come out and said, we are ready and we shall do it.
Okay.
So
to you...
So to me, if they may not be able to meet every other thing that the Jubilee would want, because we are the ones also who are
Actually,
hurting.
Jubilee has been explicit, Alice. They are okay with the IBC as constituted.
No, they are not happy. They are not happy that some faults were found.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ken, in a previous AMLive session, we tried to unbundle what did the Supreme Court say, because that's where we miss it. There were about 11 key points that the Supreme Court ruled, and all except 3 were technology related. And for me, it's when we go outside the Constitution, when we go outside what the Supreme Court said, that we get into a problem. The Supreme Court didn't talk anywhere about Al-Gurai. The Supreme Court didn't talk anywhere about OT-Morpho. But there are certain things that the Supreme Court talked about. I've all along said, why don't we restrict ourselves to those 11 points, of which 8 were technology related? And I think of those 8, about 4 of them, IBC has addressed. The other 4, they've given reasons, and I agree with them. The most contentious issue is accessing the servers. For heaven's sake, I've had politicians talk, open the servers. Even if the servers were open now to the politicians, it wouldn't make a sense to them. But there must be a framework, and I keep insisting as an expert in this area, that there must be a framework within which cybersecurity requirements, you secure. One way of securing a system is by keeping it opaque. But you don't have to keep it opaque to even the concerned parties. There is a mechanism in which the concerned parties, Jubilee and NASA experts, could access the servers, but within under oath and within a framework. So I hear more NASA people talking about accessing the servers, politicians who have purely no clue about what they're talking about, not so much their technicians. Now, having rested the aspect of the Supreme Court, because my premise is that there were 11 points the Supreme Court talked about, let's restrict ourselves to those, let's not bring these side issues. And of those 11, 8 were technology related, and of those 8, 4 have been addressed satisfactorily. The remaining ones, there are reasons that satisfactorily that have been given. But having said that, I want to go back to the issue of dialogue and legitimacy. Dialogue we can talk at any point, but even that dialogue has got to be within the premise of the Constitution. I have a problem. Fortunately, in this group, I'm the only one who is fortunate or unfortunate not to have any of the principles to advise. If Right Honorable Raila is listening to the people like my good brother Farah, they are taking him to a slaughterhouse. He needs to stop listening to them. Whatever is being done, going outside the Constitution worked for them in 2007. It's not likely to work for them this time, because the circumstances have changed. Whatever is being done, let it be within the Constitution. I would say the same to President Kenyatta. Those who are talking to him about a benevolent dictator, Kenya has moved on. We can't go back to dictatorship. So let them shave off those people who are advising them. Talking dialogue, the Constitution does not prohibit it. We can talk, but again, whatever we talk, let it be done within. My advice to my good brother Raila is, maybe it's time that he leaves behind a legacy. I wanted to run for senatorial seat in Homa Bay, and I did everything. I went into the appeal court to be allowed to run. IBC used all flimsy reasons to block me from running. But a time comes when you say it's not life and death. You know, there's always another time. That would be my advice. I think if Raila came out today and said, look, I have done my part in bringing this country this far, and we have made tremendous progress. He doesn't have to run this time round, because obviously if he runs, I don't see how he's likely to win. He could say, for the sake of posterity, I wasn't doing it for myself. I can still run in 2022. But it's time that he stops. People were telling him to go outside the Constitution, National Accord. Remember, ICC is also watching.
Governor.
I like that. I like that, Shem.
Yes.
It's about the last bullet, you know. This is the last bullet that was talked about. And probably we should tell Honorable Raila Odinga that it doesn't have to be the last bullet. He's still very young.
Sure.
Because he can still run again. I totally agree with you. Correct. 2008, we were operating under the old constitution. And therefore, there were a lot of lacunas in the law that did not really show the way forward when we had the kind of stalemate we had. But today, we have a constitution that is very much alive, the 2010 constitution, and therefore we cannot go back to dialogue outside constitution. using any reason, valid or not valid in this particular case, we must follow the law. And the law says very clearly, let's have an election.
Okay.
But
why are we talking even about dialogue and it's not being proposed by either side? Raila has said no.
We forget about that dialogue thing. Because at the end of the day, forget about the dialogue. At the end of the day, this country is not about those two people. And therefore, they cannot lock themselves somewhere in a room and do or say things that us Kenyans, we do not feel that we are included. Because this is not about followers or people who follow you. It's about being within the law. And when you say that they're going to have a dialogue between two people, are you assuming that they have the 6 candidates do not have followers as per se? Do they also like to be included in the dialogue? Don't you also have people who have no candidates at all and want to have a say in that dialogue? How will they be included in that dialogue? And that the only way is to follow the law, because that is what we passed and that is what we are buying.
And the law says we go to the ballot and the winner takes it all.
Yes, that's the thing.
Okay.
Maybe I could explain what this dialogue thing, what I mean with it for me, the dialogue part. My premise is that the dialogue does not necessarily have to be between Uhuru and Raila. Okay. The dialogue would be between Kenyans, and that includes the two of them. They are also Kenyans.
All right.
And for me, this dialogue brings about what we call legitimacy. It would so useful, even if just making an attempt that you reach out would go a long way at secure. If I was President Uhuru, and this is why I'm saying, he better stop listening to these advisors.
Okay.
In terms of, there's what we call being magnanimity. You reach out, but still reach out within the law. Fortunately, the law is in his side. In the next 9 days, we go for an election, and he's been campaigning around well enough. He will have shown that he's above board. He's a statesman that, yes, let's talk, but whatever we are discussing, we're not talking about Nusumkati here. We are talking about what the Constitution says. Of the 11 points that IBC said, is there any other that can be fixed which has not been fixed, and there's a good reason to fix it, even within the 9 days remaining? So that's what I mean by dialogue.
We have to
I wanted to pose a question which is critical. If things are looking, every lawyer, every other person has become a constitutional expert. And, we are arguing within the Constitution. Right now, we are arguing within the time frame that elections should occur. Imagine yourself, or Kenyans must look at a situation beyond the time frame where elections should occur, where we have even been told that the president right now has only temporary powers. The country will not move after 1st of November.
Okay. Farah, you want to close on this? Because I'd like you to talk about something else.
Yeah.
Yes.
Personally, Ken, it's important for us to understand the gravity of the situation we're in now. You can see, if you really want to worry about what happens when you have a nation that is not in tandem with one another, a nation that can easily become a failed state, just look at what happened in Mogadishu 2 days ago. Sometimes it's important for us to begin appreciating that we need to protect what we have.
Okay.
And we need to protect what we have by engaging ourselves. And there is a legitimacy on the part of the Jubilee in seeking the kind of resolutions to this thing. There's also equally a powerful legitimacy on the part of NASA, because they're saying this institution has been condemned. There has been a nullified election. Nobody wants to hear that. Nobody, Alice does not want to hear, Muthomi doesn't want to hear, my friend, all of them don't want to hear. They say, okay, let's move on. The Supreme Court has said, let IEBC. Supreme Court said, let IEBC conduct this thing as an institution. As an institution. So what needs to be done is that to say, okay, fine, this is where we are. Let's go back to the drawing board. Let's see what we can reform. Let's see how we can have a free and fair election. And I don't see any reason why Uhuru should be worried. Under these circumstances, to be honest to you, let me tell you.
Okay.
If I was an advisor to Uhuru, I'll tell him, let's proceed, let's have this national dialogue. We can have that interim what they call period in which it can be decided that he still has his executive powers of a short period of time. Okay. And then we hold a free and fair elections. He's making inroads in the Coast Province, in Western Kenya, in lots of places.
Okay.
You get my point? Unless, of course, there is such a powerful fear that this thing was rigged to a powerful scale of 3-4 million last time. And the fear is that if there's free and fair elections, even with these inroads that you have made, they will still be defeated. I don't see why they should be worried.
Okay.
So that for me is let us save and protect this country. Business is losing. I was in the airport. Let me tell you people. I was in the airport some 2 days ago to pick up somebody from there. And in the morning, ordinarily, that place is full. The airport was empty. There were very few flights, very few people milling around there. Business in the CBD is not what it used to be.
Okay.
It's the same all over. We are basically a service industry. Ours is a service what they call economy. It's an agricultural economy. And more than anything else, we are a hub of international interest. We are the only island within this area. All the countries in the neighborhood, we seem to have made big strides long before. Once that thing disappears, FDI, foreign direct investments, is almost zero. People are relocating money. The economy will go to hell. And then we begin now talking sense and saying, okay, I really applaud these guys who are friends of Uhuru, the Kabando and the Kabogo and the rest of them saying, let us deal with these things and dialogue. I know they had to do it with a bit of a playing safe also by saying, no, we're not saying that the election should be delayed. But what I know is that what they're basically saying is that if it takes delaying of the elections, we might as well
Actually,
go.
one of them said that expressly.
Yes.
Because I know you want to go, and there's a topic that I wanted you really to talk about.
Yeah.
The topic of week-long, day-long demonstrations in the country. I just want to talk about this briefly, because it's already we know from last week there are deaths that have been reported.
Yeah.
You're still taking people to the streets. Luckily or unluckily for them, things like this are bound to happen. Does that concern your principal where he sits?
Look, demonstrations and picketing and is a constitutional provision that will allow anybody who has wants to send a message. So for Kenyans to demonstrate out there and to say that no, we are not happy with these things, I mean, it's a right that is enshrined in any democracy in those Bill of Rights. We have it, and the Bill of Rights, by the way, is here. Alice is a lawyer. That's the way it's enshrined. And I don't see how anybody can fault that. If I were the system, I would not get agitated over that. We'll just make sure that you protect public property and public lives in there and allow people to move around everywhere and basically allow it. But you see, we are in an extraordinary situation right now. We have a polarized country which is split right down the middle. People are talking of secession for the first time in the history of this country. And I'm talking about not the people of Northeastern Province, because we talked about secession ourselves in the 60s. Other Kenyans are talking about secession.
But does it concern you? You're not answering. Does it concern you?
It concerns me a lot. And I think it takes all our combined and collective efforts on both sides of NASA as well as Jubilee to try and bring this to an end and to have a meaningful dialogue. Before a dialogue, a proper dialogue is there. I don't see this thing. I don't see this thing dissipating in any way. So this is a way to force people to the table.
Okay, yeah. But remember, people are dying.
Yeah, people are dying, and it's happened, and it's a very sad thing. But you see, these things in a democracy when people have to bring about a change, and there is a popular outrage.
So it's okay for people to die. That's what you're telling me.
No.
That's what you're telling me.
But who's killing the people, if I may ask you?
It's the police killing the people.
So then why don't you talk to the police and tell them to stop killing the people?
Why
don't you tell Jubilee friends here, my Jubilee friends here, why don't you tell them to stop killing these peaceful demonstrators?
Allow me to address Farah.
Yes.
He's a very brilliant lawyer. Farah, that is doublespeak. You cannot be seen to be willing to bring peace and all these shenanigans to an end, yet you're being evasive with a very basic thing that is to be the first step towards meaningful dialogue.
Bad. I do not condone any deaths. I want every death.
How can you not condone deaths, yet you're the one who calls for the demonstration? Because I want to tell you this.
Oh, so somebody demonstrates, then there must be death.
If today the NASA principals, who include their followers like you, told the people no demonstration tomorrow, no one will die.
There will be no death.
There will be no death.
And if they demonstrate?
There will be no death.
If they
demonstrate,
then you'll kill them.
in the eventuality, you know, we are not responsible for what happens in the streets. Definitely, you are not responsible. Anyway. But you can be responsible enough to say, let us try another avenue of dialogue rather than going to the streets. And you also spoken very well about how you'd want this country to be a haven of entry for business and haven of peace, so that we don't lose the economy. But you also go back and say that we continue demonstrating, knowing very well what that is doing to our businesses today as we talk. Yes, you found no one at the airport. How can people continue coming here, yet the international community out there, they know what is happening in the rest of the world by media? What is reported is what they perceive to be the actual happenings in this country. Today, if there are people out there who would think that Nairobi is like Mogadishu, when they see what is happening on the streets, they say, let me cancel my reservations, let me postpone my holiday. All we need to do is be able to dialogue in boardrooms, be able to dialogue in court. Forget about this street demonstration, because there's no amount of pressure that is going to make Kenyans change the constitution unless it is going to be done through parliament to be able to allow any other form.
But demonstrations have done it before, Governor.
That was before we had a constitution in 2010.
Let me explain to you.
You know, they should be saying, we want this part of the constitution changed.
Muthomi,
right now, what they're asking for.
Have you, as your party, asked yourself, why there are demonstrations? Have you asked yourself as a party, why there are demonstrations? And what was your answer?
Because
and what is your solution?
The reason why they're demonstrating is because they do not want an election to take place.
No, they're saying they want reforms. They're demonstrating because of reforms,
they
not
laid out
elections.
specifically what reforms do they
just
want?
a minute, then I'll give you, because I know you have to
Hold on a minute. They have not said specifically what reforms they want.
They have minimum,
let me tell you,
minimum demands. They have put them
Chebukati is not in the constitution. Chiloba is not in the constitution. The ABC official not in the constitution. Those we have done before. Before these elections were held, we had the body of Isaac Hassan, who were removed. Actually, we bowed to their pressure.
Yes, we did.
We bowed to their pressure. As the ruling party, we said, it's okay. If this is what we'll call for...
So what is the solution to stopping this demonstration?
The solution...
Yes, Alice, just hold. What is the solution?
The solution to this is allowing the election to take place. If they feel they are aggrieved, let them use the constitutional allowed channels to be able to hire their grievances, which is the Supreme Court.
You are a politician, Governor. Would you go to an election where your opponent has all the returning officers on his side, or has all the instruments on his side? Would you accept to go for that election?
It is Independent Electoral Bodies Commission.
Would you accept? If you know I'm your opponent.
I think that is a very bad statement.
No, I'm just asking. I'm just asking. Would you accept?
And I think that
before I answer you, can I say
you that? Hold on.
Can I say something? I want Muthomi to answer, then Alice will answer.
You should withdraw that statement.
Why?
Allowing yourself to go to elections where your opponent...
No, that was an example, not in the case of NASA or Jubilee, but directly to Muthomi, who is a governor.
What is it focused on? Because in this particular case, we are trying to imply that the returning officers in the IBC,
they believe so. They believe so.
How?
They believe so. Because the election, they say, was rigged.
I have looked at that.
Okay, let Farah conclude, because he has to go. We'll continue with this.
Yes. Can I say something?
Yes.
We say in my language, there's a saying in Somali language, that when a child falls, it cries, because it is hurt. But if you fall in front of a child, it laughs, it sees as an amusement. You see what I mean? Some of us have been through these things for a very long period of time. We were doing these things Sabasaba in the 90s. We were fighting for change those days. And I'm sure Muthomi and Alice and all this would have said that is a good change. And then, one of the people who was with us in the struggle, at least in spirit, the late John Michuki, when we talked about we need to change the constitution, we need to do certain things, he said, but that was only to remove Moi. Now that we have removed Moi, why do we need to change this? So in other words, as long as I have one of my own there, as long as the power is back again to the house, then no, those things were basically to get this kind of results. We have the results right now. Okay. Please, these things will change. We have seen enough of history in this country. For one, what they say is that if you really want to know whether a certain piece of legislation or a regulation or a system is right, just imagine that being in the hands of your worst enemy. If you can be comfortable with that piece of legislation, that system itself, when it is in the hands of your worst enemy, then it's a fair thing. It's a good law. It's a good system.
Okay.
So what I want to tell Muthomi and Alice and Ochuodho, if you think what we're asking for right now would be the same thing you'd be asking if Raila, I'm sure you people would be very, very, scared and you don't think Raila, that you will accept it. In his hands, you will accept it.
Yeah.
Then is the only time you can try and agitate it. But I know it's not going to be the case. Let me tell you, politicians, let me tell you, the country is bigger. You should have an independent mind, independent from Raila or Uhuru or Ruto. This flock instinct, this sheep instinct, I thought we got rid of that in the 90s when we fought for change in this country. And now people would be talking about what is right for the country. If we talk about what's right for the country, me and you will come together, we'll sit somewhere. We might even decide what Raila wants and what Uhuru and Ruto wants is not good for the country and say, this is what we want, which is different from that. Right. Unless you get a political class that is able to have that independence of thought, that patriotism themselves, the ability for them to sit back and say, hey, let's reach across. And we did that in IPPG. We did that a number of times in the past. Okay. And we got this country out of some very serious situations.
All right.
We will not go anywhere. As long as one becomes a mouthpiece for Raila, another one becomes a mouthpiece for Uhuru and Ruto, and basically then it's still going to be the same.
All right.
problem.
I need to let you go, and I'll give you Shem on this.
I really wish, Ken, that what we say is what we do, and we say, I really agree with my brother Farah. Shouldn't be a mouthpiece for anyone, and yet he proceeds to be a mouthpiece for one of the principles. But again, I'm glad that he's talking about foreign direct investment. Incidentally, foreign direct investment into Kenya, as far as I recall, has been about $200 million per year. On the other hand, diaspora remittances is $2 billion per year. That is 10 times more. Meaning for FDI is 10%. Ni kama sadaka for the Christians and Zaka for the Muslims. And yet the same party that's talking about FDI was the first one to go on record to say we don't want these Kenyans abroad to vote. We know what happened last week in London, which is so unnecessary. One part of the Kenyan diaspora community demonstrating for, the other part demonstrating against. Really, that's not the picture we want to show the world. But it's partly because of the failure of our leaders to bring the country together. But having said that, Ken, I really think a conversation needs to take place. But I must emphasize, and this is where I go different ways with Mheshimiwa Farah. When he says that conversation must be outside the Constitution, that the Constitution is made for man, it's like the Constitution is just another piece of paper. And yet we have been fighting. Fortunately for me, I've been with him in those 90s when we were battling with KANU then. Clearly, we were fighting for a good constitution. And that's why Shimiwa is here was saying, we have a pretty good constitution, not perfect. No constitution on earth is perfect. But really, when we start going outside the constitution, then we have a problem. So what I must repeat again is that although I support dialogue, I support getting legitimacy, but that dialogue and that conversation must be within the framework of the Constitution. And the Constitution is very clear. It says we must respect our institutions, and the institutions include Supreme Court and IBC. And it also says that the Supreme Court itself gave a raft of points why they annulled the election. For me, that's where we should have focused. But when NASA starts going to other issues, which were not addressed by the Supreme Court, nowhere in the Supreme Court ruling did they say Chiloba or Chebukati must go. I mean, that's the fact. But when we start going out of these other things, then we lose it, in my view. But even that notwithstanding, my premise is that for the president, and fortunately none of us here is the president. The president is the national unity symbol. You can still have a chat, say, let's have a conversation, but still that conversation is to realize that we have 26th and we must have an election. So whatever we are talking about must be within that framework. It can't be outside.
All right. We'll be taking some feedback from you. Usha is on standby with the feedback. And as we wait for Usha to get ready with that, let me talk about all right, I'm told that Usha is ready. When we come back, I'd like to talk about the ICC. Usha?
Right, Ken, a lot of feedback. It seems a lot of people have a lot to say about this, so I will get right to it. We have John Githanga who says, at the end of the day, the standoff between Uhuru and Raila will be pacified by dialogue. The sooner they sit down, the better. We also have Collins who says, the current stand held by the NASA divide is really destroying our country. Everyone should follow the law. We have Joe who says, the constitution is very clear. Politicians tend to interpret the latter to suit their own interests and arguments. We also have Amos who says, Jubilee Party cannot win in a free and fair election. It needs to change the laws to win. We have Eustace who says, NASA is taking the country through a circle with no end, but it is adversely affecting day scholarship in cities. It is negative. We also have Peter who says that national dialogue cannot cure political differences. Let's respect the constitution and the ballot be the dialogue. We also have Kitui who says, no reforms, no elections. We have George Carrier who says, if you pull out of a marathon, it's not your concern who is leading or who is participating. We have Joel Mutali who says, dialogue doesn't mean power sharing. For Kenya's sake, all groups must come to factual sense, not just be blinded with their goals. We have John Githanga who says, dialogue doesn't mean power sharing. For Kenya's sake, all groups must come. Oh, that's just the one I have read. We also have John Githanga again who says, IEBC under Chebukati should not have agreed to be swayed by political waves. It should have stood its ground from the onset. And we also have Edson who says, all of us show bias when it comes to what information we take in. We typically focus on anything that agrees with the outcome we want. And finally, we have Kennedy who says, Al Gore printed excess ballots more for accepted Kims to be manipulated. Doesn't that disqualify them? So of course there is a lot more feedback, but as you can see there isn't a specific side that people are leaning more towards. I think people are really divided on this specific topic, because there's those who feel that we should go on with elections, there's those who feel that reforms should be there, and there's a majority just agree that generally they are tired of this stalemate regardless of what direction we take next. So remember hashtag AMLive NTV, that is how you can chime in and give us your feedback, and I'd be happy to let the panelists answer some of your questions. Back to you, Ken.
All right, but we shall also, if you look at the comments, what they agree on is the country needs to find a solution to this.
Yes,
at least that's one they agree on across the board. All right, we shall looking forward to another update later on. Let me bring this discussion back to the panel. There's a general view, now that we don't have a NASA, it's very difficult to have this conversation, because it's almost a united opinion against an opinion that's very neutral. You know, it's very neutral, it's moderate right in the middle.
Before we leave, Ken, the comments that came in from the viewers, I think they confirm a second thing. The second thing they confirm is that it's all split halfway.
Yes.
I think that's basically what I've personally been saying, that look, the country, we are in this situation, and for me, a middle ground is possible. And for me, that middle ground, whatever it is, has got to be within the framework of the Constitution. And we don't lose anything doing it. So that's why my premise is that clearly from that, it's good that you can win halfway and half +1, but really then Kenya will be stuck where we are. We must ask ourselves, how comes 60 years ago we were giving $4 million aid to Korea, for example? Look what they have done. And in December, we're having Kenyans abroad are meeting here. We have a convention. Basically, Kenyans out of the country generally are concerned that we don't like the way things are going. And in that event, we have the person we call the father of nuclear power in Korea is coming to talk to us. His premise, he will be sharing how did they turn around within 20 years to be a great country. So if we keep stuck on, as long as we have a majority, the majority being simply 50% +1, we'll move on. Okay, we'll move on, but the country will remain sleeping, like Kenya remains a sleeping giant.
I think what they agree with Muthomi also is that ultimately, at the end of this process, there shall be a sit-down. That is also something that the viewers talk about.
You know, when Shem Ochuodho talks about the split opinion, it does not basically mean that we must have shared power. Because if you are trying to propagate this idea that we must have a shared government, then we are getting it wrong. We cannot go back to 2008. We saw all the gains that had been made by President Kibaki go backtrack because of shared power. It is apparent that even though we may have situations where somebody may win by just a small margin, it is still a win. And that is why we talked about 50+1. So the best way of ensuring this is sorted out once and for all is for all of us to agree to obey the Constitution, which means we have to abide the rule of the law, whether it is in our favor or not, because this Constitution, we are the ones who made it, and the only way is to ensure that we express our wishes through the ballot. One of the arguments that has brought this country to its knees is on the transmission of results. No one ever talks about the results themselves, because the results are not in the server. The results are not in the Form 34A and B. The results are in the ballot paper where people did not vote electronically. They voted manually, physically, and marked the ballot papers. What we should be having a conversation around is how do we make sure that what is in this ballot paper can be communicated to Kenyans as the results as accurately as possible. And if there's anything that IEBC has done to be able to make this improvement, we should 100% support them on that.
Okay.
And move away from this dialogue or conversation on the servers, on the T-Mobile technology, on all those other things that all are aimed at transmitting the results. If we go that route, then we'll be taking Kenya to a more peaceful state instead of telling people to go to the streets. And lastly, I want probably Shem Ochuodho should be able to tell me this. If the will is there by the NASA principal to pull out of the elections, and he says, I have done that using a letter that I have written with my letterhead, and then he's told by IEBC, yes, you've used a letter, but we are advising you, as the people who actually pull you out of the race, as the body that is mandated by the law, we need you to fill a form. I would like to be told, what would be the consequences of filling the form? Why is it that he does not want to fill the form, yet he is willing? If you are told by the body that is mandated by that, with that role, to fill the form, why is he not filling the form? What will be the consequences of filling the form? That is what should actually be told.
Okay.
Why is he not filling the form?
At least you'll tell us the consequence of filling Form 24A.
I think that is him who has thrown that point here. But the consequences of accepting to go to election is also accepting that you can lose during elections. And even as NASA pushes this claim for dialogue and calling their people into the streets, they should not forget that Jubilee also has followers and has voters that voted and also feel very aggrieved by the fact that there was a ballot that was cancelled. Not because on the part of the voter there was any fault, because maybe IBC had made a mistake, or because maybe the court was even wrong. You know, we haven't, as Jubilee, agreed that the decision was okay. But we have agreed, let's go back. If the solution will be to go back to the ballot, we go back. We now have 10 days, Ken. And for me, I think the question now of pulling out or withdrawal or no reform, no elections is now with us. Okay. As a country, we must decide, is that the route that the rest of us who do not agree with NASA want to go? I think Kenyans have been waiting to go to the ballot. Those who want to go to the ballot should be let to go to the ballot. Raila, as a candidate, has withdrawn, according to him. And I think now it's irrespective of whether he now signs the form or not. His name is likely to be on the ballot. But that doesn't mean him, as a candidate, he will be participating. You see, you can decide you don't have agents, you're not even going to vote yourself as a candidate. You have to tell, you will tell your followers not to, your voters not to vote for you because you are not in this race. And I think then thereafter, depending on the results, you can still visit the court, because we are saying, let's work within the framed constitution. Then go to court and say, maybe this was not an election. And then create the room now for dialogue. I think dialogue would not occur. And you know, Ken, dialogue requires time. It requires soberness. We are in the campaign mood. People have been hurting and other people have died. And you asked the question before Farah left, why would they not call off demonstrations? And they know people are actually dying. They are saying people are being killed. But you have not heard NASA demand that their voters, their followers should stop violence, or when they come to the streets, how they should interact with the police. Because the police have to come. There are other people who are not in the demonstration. Security must be maintained. Peace must be. But we are seeing loads and loads of stones being brought to the streets. I think that doesn't mean, look like the the demonstrations are peaceful to start
but,
with.
But that
because
doesn't
you don't
mean
go,
that you, as a people's representative,
they should
you will
not be
condemn
killed.
the
They
deaths.
should not be killed, and we have condemned the deaths. But we must condemn
Okay.
demonstrations that are not peaceful, because the minute you come to the streets and you are armed, the police immediately have the right to disperse. And once that action now takes off, then it means now there will be violence.
All right.
So, but let me come to the question of the form. I'm saying simply, the form now is immaterial.
Okay.
And the court can interpret it later whichever way it wants. But
It's
I
immaterial.
think we should not make big deal. Raila has said he's not going to elections, but let him not unsettle the country because himself has pulled out from the race.
All right, I have 3 minutes and I'll give you a minute each to conclude. I'll start with Shem.
Can just briefly on the aspect of people dying. Let's also remember that the policemen are Kenyans, and some of them have also been beaten up, which is not fine. I was talking to a NASA official who told me, well, if people die, so be it, but we must do this. My premise was, I asked him, does it bother you that, how about if you are the person who was to die? Does it prick your conscience that that's problematic? But that's not to say we should not find a solution. Let me clarify. I think I understand where Governor is coming from. When I talk of dialogue, for me, there is no question of power sharing, because that's not provided for in the Constitution. What we would be talking about is just the 11 points that IBC said, that the Supreme Court said need to be fixed. To what extent have they been fixed? Is there any that's got to be fixed? In terms of Form 24A, or the Form 24 to be signed, I am not sure we have 10 days, but I believe that the ballot can be printed within a week. So we still have like a window of 3 days. My challenge to IBC, they should have stop listening to Jubilee, stop listening to NASA, go to the Supreme Court to get an interpretation, and that's what we implement. If you have to leave Raila Odinga's name out of the ballot, do it within the 7 days. And finally, manual voting. As somebody who has been pushing for technology, that's not the way we want to go. Manual systems are very vulnerable. They are only 60% solid, while electronic systems also have a problem. They are not safe, but they are about 80% secure. So to that extent, they are much better than the manual, and we don't want to go back that route.
All right, Governor, 1 minute.
I think Shem is misleading Kenyans. We do not vote electronically. We normally mark a ballot paper with a pen. That is manual. That ballot paper is physical. It's in the ballot box. It can be counted in terms of how many are there. What he's talking about is simply transmission. In my conclusion, we must have an election in the next 90 days. I mean, the next 9 days. Next 10 days, on 26th of October, we must have an election. Because Kenyans are fatigued, we are exhausted, we are frustrated. We must bring back Kenyan into normalcy. I am in charge of a county government that has not seen any development money since we came into force 1.5 months ago. We are operating governments that have no salaries as per se, because the treasury doesn't want to release any money. We are an institution whereby we have to do a lot of supplementary budget because money has been taken to elections. We have put aside 12 billion as a country to do elections. How can we then take away 12 billion, which of course has been dispensed over the moment, because you expect IBC for now has already started mobilizing several of its resources to make sure there's an election. If we don't have an election, it means we lose that 12 billion, and we already lost more money. We need to come back to normalcy. Let's have an election, period.
All right, Alice.
In this election, Uhuru Kenyatta has lost because his ballot was cancelled. Raila Odinga had lost because he did not have the vote, according to the announced results, which were now cancelled. We are ready now for another election. We have 10 days. I think the country should galvanize along that and ensure that, because also the NASA team have many people, they can put their people in every polling station. And if this ballot is theirs, they will take it. It's only one ballot that we are going for, the presidential, and the best way, because everybody, both parties are feeling, look, we cannot give in, we cannot give in. Let the people decide now. You remember Matiba, Kenneth, pulled out from elections in 1997, but he did not disrupt. The rest of the Kenyans went to the ballot except him. And I think that is what NASA should allow, and then pick up the demand for dialogue and for reform of the institution that is mandated to carry out elections. Let them not put Jubilee in that mess, because we are also a victim of the inefficiency even of IEBC. They have said they are ready for elections, and with the benefit of doubt should be given to IEBC. Too much prescription to the IEBC by all the parties, all the politicians is what is actually killing or bringing us to this. And as a country, I think the international community should also not take sides. Okay. They should demand the constitution to be followed. It's unfortunate that one party, for now, as the constitution is framed, is likely to lose. And remember, we are saying we'll win because we are campaigning. All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Alice Wahome, Member of Parliament, Kandara, Governor Muthomi Njuki, and Dr. Shem Ochuodho, the chairman of the Kenya Diaspora Alliance. There's a tweet that Ushu read earlier, and it sums up everything. I said, if you pull out, it's a very simple analogy, but it says, if you pull out of a marathon, then you don't determine who remains in the race and who officiates the race. I think that's a good place to end. Thank you very much for watching, and thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for participating. And better living coming up at the top of the hour. And I think also weather right now. All right, there's no weather, but thank you very much for watching. Better living coming up shortly.